Welcome everyone. It's 11:01, and glad to see us starting our Fall Town Series, uh, uh, Fall Town Hall series again after taking August off. I'm very excited about our speaker, Tony Martignetti, who as I'll introduce you to formally in a moment. Good to see a nice turnout here. I'm Alex Counts. For those who don't know me, I'm the executive director of the India Philanthropy Alliance. And I want to welcome all of you that are here, all of you that will listen to this recording, and those who will join us in a few minutes. In addition to this series, where on a roughly monthly basis, we tackle issues that are of interest to organizations that are involved in IPA or India Giving Day, and we're welcome suggestions from you. In October, we're going to have a session on two new studies about philanthropy in the United States towards India and within India, two separate studies. In November, we're going to have one on monitoring and evaluation, and in December on technology and AI in the nonprofit sphere. So we welcome suggestions from you. We almost always have a guest speaker. I think we've always have a guest speaker in the town halls. And so we have an expert in whatever field we're looking at that day. The topic today is planned giving, or what some of us in the kind of Indian American community call legacy giving. And Tony Martignetti is our speaker. I'll introduce him, I'll get to that in just a second. But let me just preface it by my own journey with planned giving. I'll say that I'll begin by saying that, one of my observations, as I approach 60 and have been active in the nonprofit area for almost 40 years, is that the professionals and the leaders and the fundraisers who do best, they tend to spend more time in what I'll call areas that are important but not urgent. And they try to limit their time in things that are urgent but not important. And a classic example in my mind in fundraising of something that's important but not urgent is planned giving. And so how I got introduced to it, there was a guy who trained me as a fundraiser in the late 90s. And we focused on major gifts. And once we went from very, very small organization to raising $6-8 million a year, he said, okay, there's now a new frontier, Alex, I want you to look at. And it's called planned giving. And it's when people, you ask people to put your organization in their estate plan and their will. And he said, you know what, I know a lot about this, but I'm not an expert. And he advised us to have a kind of a planned giving expert, someone with skills like Tony, to come to train us. So I did that, and we were feeling pretty good. The economy was good. We were raising a lot of money. And we put some attention to planned giving as a result. And within a few years, 1 year we might get a bequest of $500,000. The next year it might be $83 million. I remember these things because when you hear of them, you're very excited. I recently heard that same organization, which I haven't led for a while, got a bequest of $1.3 million in the last few years, which was kind of a lifeline to it. So you invest in this. It doesn't pay off immediately, but it does pay off in time. I recently have been working with an organization, a very prominent animal rights organization that gets about $10 million in bequests every year. Imagine that, 10 million per year, about a quarter of its budget, or something on that order. So now, how did I meet Tony? Well, when my book, Changing the World Without Losing Your Mind, was published, it was getting some good reviews, and Tony reached out and said, I'd like to interview you about your book. And I said, well, who are you? And then I started to learn about him, and he is a specialist in planned giving and state-by-state registrations and other things, I'm sure, but he's also a generalist, and he wants to make information that helps small to medium-sized nonprofits thrive available, and not through high-priced consultants, but through putting in the public domain. So he started something called Nonprofit Radio, and he's interviewed me now at least 3 times on that. It's been a pleasure. He has a great following, and yet, I knew he had this real expertise in planned giving. So we scheduled him to speak to the IPA board to talk to them about it. And the month we chose, this is no joke, was March of 2020. So think about a time where it'd be difficult to get nonprofit leaders to focus on things that are important but not urgent. Well, that's probably the month in the last 25 years. So he made a strong impression, but I'm not sure people were able to act on what he taught us then. So I thought it was time to bring him back, and here he is. And so Tony gave me a very short formal introduction, which I'll read now. He's an evangelist for planned giving. He started as a frontline fundraiser in 1997. What? That's the same year actually we started Grameen Foundation. Same year I started really fundraising. Interesting. He and kicked off his consulting in 2003. He knows how to launch and grow planned giving fundraising programs. He's active on LinkedIn and on TonyMartignetti.com, where you'll find his consulting and his podcast, Tony Martignetti, nonprofit radio, big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%, meaning the 5% of the largest nonprofits, they can hire consultants to do all this. What about the 95% who can't? Go to his radio program. Tony is a lawyer, but he doesn't talk like one. He'll weave in his backgrounds in stand-up comedy and improv to deliver planned giving within your reach. Tony, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for having me back. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. I see just as many otter note takers as people almost. Pretty soon, it'll just be all the note takers will just be talking to each other.
Yeah, I've heard from someone who tracks these trends more than I do that it's now getting to the point where you have like an avatar of an employer interviewing an avatar of a potential employee. Like the people don't actually show up. It's just getting kind of nuts. But
Right. I was thinking of you all last night because I was out with a friend and we were sitting at the bar and I was offered an IPA. And I thought, whoa, you know the India Philanthropy Alliance? I said, it's incredible. So
yeah,
I chose the IPA, of course. But
all right.
I was thinking about you last night. You were on my mind as I was thinking about this morning.
All right. Well, you can never have too many IPAs. Well, no, that's actually not true. But anyway, we're going to spend the first half. Of this hour. I'm going to ask basically two questions to Tony, pretty obvious ones, and then we're going to spend the second half opening it up. So whatever questions you have, no question is too basic or too advanced. Whatever will serve you. So Tony, the first question is that I have is we'll get to how you move forward a planned giving program, whether it's something that is non-existent or something that is in the nascent stages or something that is somewhat advanced. But help us understand the why. Why should people make time for this amidst all the other things that they have to do to run a small to medium-sized nonprofit, and the kind of people and where people on this call, they also have to think about they're not deploying their funds across town or across their state, but they're deploying funds 8,000 miles away in India, and that brings its own complications. Why should people be giving more attention to this?
I think you captured it very well, Alex, when you said it's important but not urgent. The important part is the sustainability of your work. Planned giving is ideal for helping to either launch or grow your long-term savings, your endowment. Endowment is essential for the long-term sustainability of your work in the community. I say this because so many planned gifts come unrestricted. Alex was talking about the thousands and millions that an organization that he had been working with had realized when they started planned giving. You'll find that people can give and do give many, many multiples of their lifetime giving through their estate plan. And the gift that I would like to focus on with you all is very simple gifts in wills, where someone puts you alongside their husband, wife, partner, children, grandchildren in their will. There's a place for you. There's a gift for you. And when people do that, well, there are a lot of reasons, but why their giving can be so many multiples larger than their lifetime giving. What you might imagine they would be able to give you through their estate plan, through their will. And the biggest reason is there's no lifetime cost. Someone puts you in their will this year, I believe they have made their gift. Their commitment in their will is their gift. That will be a gift of cash to your work at their death, alongside all the other gifts too. As I said, all those dear loved ones, you're right alongside those dear loved ones. So these large gifts very, very often outsize related to their lifetime giving. They very often come unrestricted. So we all know there's no better, more desirable gift than unrestricted cash. And I encourage the charities that I work with. I do have nonprofits that I'm working with to launch or grow their planned giving programs. I encourage them to put as much as possible of that unrestricted cash when it does come at the donor's deaths into that savings account, that endowment. And that's the long-term savings fund for your work.
What, before I get to my second question, thank you for being so concise and compelling. What kind of multiples do you see? I've seen some pretty incredible multiples of someone giving an annual amount of X, and yet the amount in their will for our organization is a huge multiple of that. I've also seen people who never gave to the organization or hadn't in years give. But what do you, when you think about it, you think about someone who gives $100 annually, and you make certain assumptions about their net worth. But what have you seen over time? And what does the data say to the extent you're familiar with it?
Yeah. Alex, I've seen multiples over 7,000 where the lifetime giving history, I don't like to say lifetime value. Some people, the lifetime value, I don't, I just, they don't mean literally we're valuing the person. I realize that, but I just like to say, I prefer to say the lifetime giving history or their lifetime giving total is in the thousands, in the low thousands. We're talking about four digits, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. And the gift in their will is in the millions. I've seen that many times. So often I've seen I call it the planned giving multiplier, which is just something that I devised, which is the number of times greater than the person's lifetime giving total that their estate plan gift is. And I've seen that. I think the largest I've seen is around 7,500 times. So you're right. We make certain assumptions based on the way people give. But like all assumptions, there are exceptions, and our assumptions are often wrong about all manner of things in life, right? We make assumptions. Sometimes they are valid. Sometimes our assumptions about people's capacity to give are not aligned with reality, but we're basing it on what we know. We know of the person. In your hypothetical, Alex, the person gives $100 a year and they've done that for many, many years. Their lifetime giving history might be $2,000, $3,000 if they've been giving for 30 years. That's a pretty long-term donor. And as I said, it's not uncommon to see gifts in wills from that type of donor in the millions because there is no lifetime cost. So people can give you more than they feel they can give you during their lifetime for all kinds of personal reasons. People don't want to outlive their wealth. They may not even think of themselves as wealthy. They may have millions of dollars to give at their death through their estate plan, but they may not think of themselves as wealthy. That's very, very common.
Yeah.
And no matter how much we would call it wealth, they might just call it how much money I have. Something catastrophic could happen to me, or my
Or a loved
spouse or
one.
partner, or a child or grandchild, and I have to be there for them, and that could wipe out everything I have. There's that kind of sentiment that keeps people from giving what, we might objectively say, oh, you could give so much more. Well, that's an assessment for each donor to make for themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've
Think,
seen that, and Alex, your question also gives rise to something else that I think is valuable. Kind of leading into this, who are the best prospects? You hypothesized with a very loyal donor giving $100 a year. Well, if that person has been giving just $10 a year, and they've been doing that for many years, and let's say they lapsed a few years, throughout 15, 20, 25, 30 years of giving, maybe they lapsed a few years, no big deal. But if they're currently giving, and if really their annual gift was $10, and they've been doing that for that number of years, 15, 20, 25 years, they are an excellent prospect for the type of gift that we're talking about. That's someone you would want to open a conversation with about their estate plan, their will, about including your work in their will, because they've been giving to you for so many years. And again,
so
as I made clear, you don't want to be constrained by what their lifetime giving has been when you're thinking of what their potential in their will could be.
yeah. So hopefully we've got your attention as you think about a typical donor who gives habitually, and then you add up what they've given, and then you multiply that by 7,500 or just 1,000. Then there's some opportunity here. So before I turn it over to the community, Tony, so we've talked about the why, talk about the how. You know, Planned giving, as the person who trained me said, it forces us to talk about two things we don't often like to talk about in our society: death and money, and death and our personal wealth. And yet there's some steps. If an organization in this call has absolutely done nothing or minimal on planned giving, what are some steps they can take? If they've taken some steps, like the ones you might talk about first, what are some of the next steps? And then, without going in too deep, what are some of the things that look like that are more advanced that an organization, once you've put that foundation, then where places you might be able to take it from there.
Well, you're gonna criticize me again for challenging you now a second time. We're only 19 minutes in. I do want to push back on something, that this is a conversation about death and money.
Okay.
You're not talking to folks about what is your death plan for us. That's not what the conversation is about. It's actually about life, the life and the sustainability of what you have in common with your donors, your work, your mission. So the conversation is about the life and sustainability of the important work that you're doing in India. Whatever that might be, whether it's youth, education, whether it's religious, whether it's the environment, cultural, political, however you're positioned, the importance of your work, that your work must continue for decades and generations, the life of your work, the sustainability of your work. That's what the conversation is about. You'll be talking to folks who are very loyal donors, as I said earlier, been giving to you for at least 10 years. It could be decades, right? You may have some folks who have been giving to you for decades. Again, we don't care about what their average gift is or what their lifetime giving history is. It's the longevity and the consistency. They love your work. They've been thinking about you and giving to you for so many years. They don't want your work to stop. You're talking to them not about death, about life, the life of your work, the continuation of your work for decades and generations. And that's why you're talking to them about a long-term gift. And this is long-term giving. Alex, that's why, you hit it right on the head when you said it's important but not urgent. And unfortunately, planned giving gets the back burner sometimes, often, because it's not urgent work. These aren't gifts that are going to come in the next year. And I know you all have immediate priorities that have to be funded. You got to keep the lights on. You got to keep salary paid. You have a 5-year plan perhaps or 3 or 5 year plan perhaps to fund. But it is important. Any good business person is thinking not only about the immediate, the 3 to 5 years, but also the long term of their business. And we're all business people. We just happen to be leading and fundraising for nonprofit businesses. So the long term is essential, and that's really where the conversation is around the life and sustainability of your work. You asked about some steps that folks can take. Identify your long term loyal donors, and some of them may be known to you. Some folks may have been with you for so long that you know them off the top of your head. Just as we're having this conversation, a few people are occurring to you. You're starting to identify your top prospects, the folks that would be ideal to open a conversation with. And the conversation goes along the lines of, we're focusing on the long term. We're encouraging long-term gifts from people just like you who have been giving to us for decades. And you'll know the person's giving history. You've been giving to us for 14 years. You may not realize it's been that long, but it's been 14 years that you've been supporting us. And we're thinking about our long term, and we're asking our most committed donors like you to join us for the long term by including our work in your long term plans. And specifically, we're asking about gifts and wills. Is that something you would consider? Would you consider including us in your will? There you go. Now that's not the first 3 minutes of your phone conversation or your lunch with the person, naturally, but there's the way to lead into and actually solicit a gift by will with your most loyal, committed donors. We're not doing donor acquisition here. We're not bringing new folks to your work. These are your long-term, loyal, committed donors. So, all right. So if I would say, Alex, in reply to your question, if names aren't occurring to you right now, as we're talking about it, query your CRM database, query your giving history for longevity. Who are the folks who have been giving to you for 10, 15, 20, maybe more years? And again, if they lapsed a couple of years in there, that's not so bad. That doesn't matter. As long as they're currently giving. If they made a gift last year and or this year, 2024 or 2025, I consider that a current donor. They've been giving to you for a long time. Those are your top prospects. And those are the conversations to start having.
One follow-up before I turn it open. So, I remember when I did my training, my boot camp on this, and I guess my eyes were glazing over a little bit. And as the person said, well, first of all, you can just do something very simple. You could put some language on your website that you are encouraging this. And of course, with all the caveats, check with your financial planner and lawyer. But it's just something that you can actually slip into an estate plan for someone who's just, who happens to be revising their will, and you just make it easy for them to do that. And another thing that's a little more complicated, but is to start a plan giving society. People who've told you that you're in their will and they're willing to let you go public about that. So you can start to create a roster of people who are these, getting in conversations with people like you just mentioned, obviously with the right folks. But just in terms of setting up organizational infrastructure, taking some basic steps so that you're kind of in the market for this beyond the direct approach to donors. Are there some infrastructure or communication steps that you would recommend?
Yeah, a little further down the line, I would encourage you. We're all small and mid-sized
Mhm.
nonprofits, and that's the sweet spot. That's the other 95% that I produce my podcast for, the Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. I'm always thinking of, facetiously, the other 95%, the 95% of nonprofits that are small and mid-size. So your best channel is going to be those one-on-one conversations that we just talked about. But yes, on the website, you can have a planned giving page. There are three key things that I would encourage you to share so that people can take that information and go to their attorney or use an online service if they're doing that for their will, without having to ask you. You want to, of course, you want to make this as low barrier as possible. So some people will contact you, and your long-term loyal donors are ready for the kinds of conversations that I just talked about. But for others, three things to share on your website so that they could take the information and do it themselves without having to consult with you. And those are your legal name, the name under which your charity is incorporated, your federal tax ID number, right? The EIN, employer identification number, federal tax ID number. You got that with your IRS charitable designation, and your office address here in the States. So your legal name, your tax ID, and your office address. With those three things, people can put you in their will or other types of planned gifts without having to ask you. And again, we want it to be low barrier. We want people to tell you because the next step might be building that recognition society, Alex, that you just asked about. So we encourage folks to let you know that they've included you in their will. But for some people, it's just so personal and so private, they're not going to tell you. You might send mailings with checkoff boxes that say, I've included you, I've included you. You might do that for years, and the same people, for some folks, it's just, they're not going to tell you. You won't find out until they have died. And I know that's regrettable because you'd like to be able to say thank you, but that's the donor's wishes. We have to respect that. So we give people lots of opportunities to let us know, but just knowing that for some people, they just never will. And yeah, Alex, you creating the Planned Giving Recognition Society. That's a very good way of recognizing folks who have made this commitment to you, and they're the ones obviously who have told you. Those are the gifts you know about. You might recognize your donors who are outright current lifetime donors at certain dollar levels. Maybe the $50 level or the 500 or 1,000, wherever your giving is aligned. You may recognize those people with a stewardship society or a recognition society. I think your planned giving donors, people who make this commitment, when they do reveal it to you, they deserve the same respect, the same stewardship. So have a recognition society for your planned giving donors. An easy name for that is the year that you were founded. It could be the 1977 Society. Or if it's the year Alex and I began fundraising, it's the 1998, 1997 Society. 1997 is when we agreed. It could be your 1997 Society. Another possibility, a founder's name, if that person's name is recognizable. So there's something that we all have. We all have a year that our charity became incorporated and we started our work, and we all have a founder's name. So there's a couple ways of avoiding the sort of ubiquitous, the legacy society, the heritage circle. Meh. That could fit anywhere. Make it something iconic. I encourage the nonprofits that I work with to have some fun with your recognition society name. Name it something iconic. I worked with an organization that named it for their address. They were based in New York City, and they were known, I can't remember the address, but it was somewhere on Amsterdam Ave in New York City, like the 375 Amsterdam Circle, because everybody knew their iconic building. And that's the key. It should be something that your donors know, Not that the world at large is going to recognize. We don't care about the world at large. This is something for your donors. Make it something that they recognize. It's special to them, like your founder's name or the year of your founding. It's something like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. I'm gonna open it up in a minute, and but I want to say I just in organizations that I advise, I try to have them gradually develop a culture where it is unusual to have someone on your board of directors who's not remembered you in their estate plan. I don't think you want to make it mandatory or put any undue pressure, but you want a situation where your planned giving society might have 40 people, including 80% of your currently serving board. Board members often ask, "What can I do beyond write a check this year?" Well, this is an answer to that question. The second thing is I would recommend that you check the language of organizations that are in your industry, in your nonprofit field, but are like maybe 4 or 5 times larger than you. And normally they'll have language about planned giving on it. And you can take that language. There are 4 or 5 different models I've seen. And by the way, Tony's point is absolutely correct. The India Philanthropy Alliance, our actual legal name is the India Philanthropy Alliance Association. And you want to have them people in your will put the actual legal name. That's the reason we chose that name. Is it's a quirk of the law of the state of Delaware, and we had to put the word association there. Well, have it be the actual name, and so those are a couple little thoughts. But let me open it up to the community. What questions do you have? Maybe you've taken some steps in the direction. You've had some good results. Maybe you've had some setbacks. You've some questions. The floor is open.
And can I throw out a first question too? I'm interested in whether this is a difficult subject to talk to folks with because of Indian culture. I don't know. And if that is, then let's talk about, because all the advice I have may be not useless, I hope, but if we need strategies for how to talk to Indian Americans about this subject, let's surface that. So we're actually, talking about getting you all started in your planned giving conversation. So not to dominate the questions, but if that's an issue, let's raise it.
Yeah,
Well,
feel
that
free.
was my
Let's talk
question
about it.
actually. That's a huge issue on how to start talking, because the minute you start talking, the other party thinks that you're wishing them to die today.
Yeah.
To be frank, I haven't had that discussion even in my family. Forget about outside. It's such a sensitive topic among Indians, even those who live in the US. How do we begin the conversation? I think I really got a great point from Alex that, try those first who have been donating for 5, 10, 15 years, who know about our work, who have been to the site and checked our work. And all of that actually is very, very helpful. But I still feel people think I'm extrovert, but I still feel this particular aspect is the hardest one for me to bring up for a discussion.
Tony.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, sir. I thought that might be the case, but I didn't know for sure. So yes, you're right. You want to make sure you're talking to the right people first, those who are loyal, committed
Sure.
to your work. Okay. What I think may also help is, the focus is on the life of your nonprofit, the longevity, the sustainability. So these loyal, committed donors know how important your work is because they've been with you for so many years. So you're now focused on the long term. So I wonder if there's a way, so I had hypothesized in my hypothetical solicitation conversation, I had said, is this something you would consider including us in your will? Maybe that's the taboo. Maybe you don't go quite that far, perhaps. But is there a way that you could see helping us for the long term? And
Yeah.
leave the question to the donor, so that I don't know. Would they then raise the topic, or no, you're saying, it's like a death conversation. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Sure.
I mean, I don't want folks to be uncomfortable, but I do want each of you to have these sustainability gifts, these planned gifts among your fundraising portfolio. So maybe
And
it's the focus again, the focus on your long-term work, and maybe turn it back to the donor. How might they be able to help you in the long term? Now, I can suggest a different type of gift. You can tell me if this has applicability or this is also a non-starter. Please be honest. Life insurance.
Mhm.
Life insurance, you could be named a beneficiary of a
your
person.
organization.
Your organization. Yes, we're all talking about the organization level. Your nonprofit, again, with that same information. All they need is your legal name, your tax ID, and your address. And you could be named as a beneficiary of a life insurance policy. Now, not 100% beneficiary. The family always, I say this many times, probably 100 times a year, I say, family comes first. Of course, your family comes first. But can you carve out a little bit for our work? So if there's a life insurance policy, can you carve out 3 or 5 or 10% for our work after 97 or 95 or 90% of that life insurance benefit goes to your family? Can you carve out a little bit for us? So maybe that's, but maybe other than will, which might be too forward for the culture, maybe life insurance is a possibility. You could be named a beneficiary of other things that are financial assets, like a person's IRA, their individual retirement account, and any kind of IRA. They're all manner. There's traditional, there's Roth, there's SEP, there's simple. We don't need to know what type of IRA they have. If they have an IRA, it has beneficiaries who get paid at the person's death because what's left in the account has to be distributed at their death. Your charity, again, legal name, tax ID, office address, that's all they need, can be one of the death beneficiaries of any type of IRA. Pension plan, if their company has a pension plan. Some checking and savings accounts have these death payments. Brokerage accounts, if they have they have a brokerage account where they may not be actively trading stocks, but maybe someone does it for them, or maybe they do actively trade. I'm talking about like a Fidelity or a Schwab or a JP Morgan. They have a little brokerage account, or maybe they have a big brokerage account. That account has to be distributed at their death. Your nonprofit could be one of the beneficiaries named there. So I don't know. Does that
Let's
sound like it might be more palatable, sir? In a
Yeah, I think so.
conversation,
Yeah. Yeah,
other
definitely.
than someone's will. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. So there's other avenues. So you want to be talking to the right people
Mhm.
about the life of your work. You're now focused on the long-term life, that sustainability.
Mhm.
And are there some ways that you might be able to, is there a way or some way that you might be able to help us in the long term? And maybe you make some suggestions or wait to see if they suggest anything around your sustainability.
Yeah, let
Sure.
me
Thank
just
you.
thank you, Satish. And let's go to others. But I'll just say, one of the things you may notice is that organizations that really take this seriously, I would say in almost 100% of their annual reports, they will have a section about planned giving. And maybe they'll have some template language. They'll just be a reminder. Their newsletters, their website, they're always, I mean, talking about this with people, I can guarantee you it can be a little awkward the first few times, just because our own whatever uncomfortableness, but you get better at it. But
It
even
does.
without
It definitely, yes.
but even without that,
Your third one will be much easier than your second and your first.
but
Yeah.
anytime you're putting out a communication, you should ask yourself a question: should we slip in a little bit here about plan giving, a reminder, because you don't know when people people revise their wills periodically, and you just want to you don't want to have too much time gone by between the last time they read something in your newsletter or annual report about the fact that you're seeking these, and the fact that oh yeah, I should put in that organization. They're trying to build a plan giving, and they have this thing, the 1997 Society. Yeah, it'd be fun to be part of that. So, okay, let's hear from
Alex,
others.
can I just piggyback? That's very savvy advice. You're planting seeds.
Mhm.
You're planting seeds, and I'm a big fan of sidebars. I love sidebars in a newsletter, whether print or digital, doesn't matter. Could belong in could go in the annual report. Sidebar. It's like a third of a page.
Mhm.
In under 100 words, you can say that we are focused on the long term. You know how important our work is. Here's our legal name, our tax ID, and our office address. It's so easy for you to include us in your long-term plans. Boom.
Yeah.
There's like 50, 60 words. Sidebars, you repurpose those sidebars. As Alex, as you said, annual report, any kind of newsletters, digital or print. So an event program, again,
Mhm.
digital or print.
Correct.
Now, not every event. So, I would hasten to say, if this is a memorial service for an emeritus board member who's died, that's not the right place for a planned giving sidebar in the program of that memorial service. But there are lots of events where it is appropriate. It can fit in perfectly, and you're just planting seeds, as Alex was suggesting, because you don't know when someone might be revisiting their long-term plans. We typically do this for happy occasions like marriages and births, and we typically do it for sad occasions like divorces and deaths. But you don't know when those events are going to happen in people's lives, and we're not going to inquire.
Yeah.
You're planting seeds so that when they do revisit their plan, you're top of mind.
I think it should be, the exception, not the rule. It should be exceptional that you don't mention plan giving in a gala, fundraising gala. Now, it may only be 2 sentences of a script of a 2-hour program, but and then in the booklet you hand out, if you do that, there should be a page about that. I mean, maybe occasionally it's not appropriate, but I've never heard. I don't think in any Indian American gala that I've been to have I heard plan giving mentioned. And now maybe I had too many glasses of wine by the time it was. That's possible, but I think it doesn't tend to it doesn't need to be a focus to be
Too
something that
many,
you're planting the seed.
too many
Um,
IPAs. Some of
um,
those nights, maybe. Um,
maybe let's hear
yes,
from some others. Let's hear before we
yeah.
run out of time.
Alex, if I could just piggyback on that,
Yes.
Tony, thank you so much for this information. We are not fundraising for ourselves, but we are an intermediary who hosts a lot of these legacy funds on the behalf of our donors, for our grantees. But just to Satish's point, it is really out of sight, out of mind, right? And planting seed, I also cannot emphasize the importance of that. So sharing an example as an inspiration, we talk to some donor regularly. We talk to our donors about the option of planned giving. And after one conversation, literally the next week, we have one of the donors came back to us and shared with us a really sad news that they just found out they have cancer final stage. And the conversation came obviously very fresh on time. But again, this planting seeds, because you never know when these live events happen, right? And in fact, they were so happy when they came back to us. They're like, I'm so glad that you gave us that information, because now I don't want to waste my time when my days on earth are numbered to think about how to do all these things. So yeah, just sharing a story to get people inspired about getting into this uncomfortable conversation. And if I could add a
Thank you for that.
question.
Just thank you for that. It's a bittersweet story, but it's instructive. Thank you.
My question, though, Tony, is because we play this role of providing an operational infrastructure, meaning hosting legacy funds for donors, right? I'm always curious, and it's going to help other NGOs thinking as well. How do donors consideration operationally about how and to whom they want to steward their wealth after they are passed. Yesterday, Alex also led another IPA session where there was interesting question about if we are a small NGO, the donor might love our mission, but they might not feel comfortable of our capacity to steward the wealth and implement the plan in the long term, right? So and that's where many of our donors come to us to use the infrastructure, because we've been around and they know that we would steward the plan in the event the NGO might cease to exist or some issues happen. We can reallocate their fund according to their will. But it would be helpful to understand how donors make these decisions on the very practical and operational aspect.
Yeah, you do have to allay a donor's concerns that your work is going to survive them, right? That's basically what you're getting to. In a will, that's very easily done because the clause in the will can just say that there's a contingent beneficiary. So if the work of your organization should cease, then as a contingency, this gift goes to some other nonprofit. That's harder to do in the beneficiary forms that I was describing: the life insurance, the IRAs, the pension plans, the bank and brokerage accounts. You typically can't name a contingent beneficiary in those. It really would depend on the company and that manages the asset for you. What their death benefit payment policies are. But typically, you don't have that same degree of flexibility that you do if it's a gift in the will. So, you're counting on the person having faith in that the work is going to continue. If the work, I've been doing this for 28 years, and I've never had a gift, even from the early years, where the charity failed and didn't survive the donor. So we're talking about a very rare instance where a charity would cease. But if it did happen, in the rare case, the assets of the charity, as small as they might be, are going to go to some other charity. That would be an operation of state law under whatever state the charity is incorporated. The assets can't just be dissolved and go to a person because they're charitable assets, even if the assets are small. So they're going to continue to some other charity, and then that's where the gift would end up going, to that successor charity. But again, we're talking about a rare case.
I think Lee's point, though, is how do you compete? If someone gives to 10 organizations and they're thinking about putting 3 in their will, how can you give yourself the best chance to be one of those 3? And one of the things is to make sure you use various opportunities to say that you are seeking bequests, and to not let those opportunities pass. But just one other thing here is when I was trained, maybe the thinking is evolved since then, is that if you're a nonprofit that's been around for 7 years or more, people are going to pretty much assume that you're going to be around for a while, and you're in the mix. That thinking that you'll be gone before they are, or soon after they depart, is not there. If you've been around for fewer than 7 years, you might have a somewhat of a disadvantage. But once you've been around, and I think almost every organization on this call has been around for that amount of time or more, you're in the game. That won't be a big consideration of yours. I don't know if that kind of thumb rule still stands, but that's how I was taught.
So would that be the case of us as NGOs seeking for funding might have that there's a gap between what we perceive of donors' concerns versus the actual donors' concerns. And I think that's kind of where my question went is, Tony, from your experience, do you see that as part of donors' concerns about the about the NGOs kind of, executing their will, or that's just our own perception of their concerns? Because I hear this question a lot in other sessions.
I don't see it much. And I
That's
agree
good
with
to know.
Alex. 5 to 7 years of existence, most people are going to be confident that your work will survive them and will continue indefinitely. I mean, again, rare cases where that doesn't happen. But no, I hesitate to say never. I've been doing this 28 years. I can't remember every conversation, of course, but very, very rare if it has ever happened where the longevity of the charity was called into question. Yeah,
Let's see if we
I
can
just don't
take
see it. I don't
let's see
see
if we
it.
can take two more questions at least from others. Just this is wealth of information here and insights. The floor is open. Well, I will one of the phrases that I was trained to use in this again, this is a while ago. This is in the late 90s when we were both getting started, was creating a permanent legacy. And sometimes in the Indian American community, and there are differences, people tend to celebrate in the Indian community more death anniversaries than like the birthday of someone who's passed, for example. There are subtle differences with how we think about these transitions between the two cultures to my familiarity. But and so some in the Indian American community, we tend to talk not plan giving, but legacy giving. But in terms of giving someone an opportunity to create a permanent legacy within your organization, is that language that you use? Because again, if someone contributes to your endowment $1 million to your endowment, takes it from 8 million to 9 million, depending on the terms that of their bequest and the way you want to use it. I mean, that's money that may be in place, kicking off, revenue for the foreseeable future. Or is that language you don't tend to use?
I tend not to use the word legacy actually. And that comes from having been lightly rebuked or maybe say admonished or embarrassed by some folks who that don't consider them that they have a legacy. I used to get pushback like, well, the legacy that's for the Gates and the Buffetts,
Mm.
you know, and now you might, it would be Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, that's for them. I'm just a donor. I just give. I want, even when folks are talking about maybe $1 million gifts, they just don't think of themselves as having a legacy, even though we all do. Just like I said earlier, folks don't think of themselves as being wealthy, even though they may have many millions of dollars. They may have, not ultra high net worth. Those folks definitely know that they're wealthy. But folks who have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, $10 million, they don't think of themselves as wealthy, even though objectively we very, very well might. But that goes to our assumptions again about people and how they perceive themselves. They don't think of themselves as wealthy, and they don't think of themselves as having a legacy. So after I got lightly admonished that I don't have a legacy, that's not me, and then we have to pivot. Well, we are talking about you and your long-term gift was just forgive my word choice. So in communications, whether it's print or digital or any kind of writing and certainly in conversations, I tend not to focus on the person's legacy. I mean, unless they bring it up, but it's rare. We're usually talking to donors who they just consider themselves a donor. They love your work. They want it to continue for decades and generations.
Very, very, very good. Who else? Anyone else? And the language I was taught, by the way, Tony, it was what your permanent legacy is, like what a legacy that will outlast you. And when I think of it as a writer, I think I want to make sure that years after I pass, that my books are still available and in print. And to know that some of your wealth is still in the endowment of a nonprofit years after. Life is impermanent, but certain things can be permanent if you set them up a certain way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are ways of describing it. I just, you asked a very precise question, so I'm giving you
no, I'm glad you did. And
precise
and
answer. Yes, you can be, your work will sustain us. You'll be with us again. You've heard my decades and generations. The work will continue. You're sustaining us for the long term.
Yeah.
And all the things that we typically say to donors about how grateful we are for their gifts. It's just that in this case, we're talking about long-term gifts.
Mhm. Mhm. And what I'm hearing is that you can phrase it. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Probably the only wrong thing to do is to just not ever broach it at all in any conversation and in any website and in any event and any gala. But how you do it, the way I was taught, you almost put the donor at the front, center of the, I want to help you create a permanent legacy within our organization. And Tony's more talking about it is the organization kind of at the center of the sustainability of our organization and our impact. And depending on the person who's raising the issue and the person who's receiving it, that or other model ways of talking about this may fit well. But as long as you find a way to raise it that's comfortable for you and that works for your donors, you're in the game. We have time for maybe one short question or comment before we wrap up here.
Can you hear me? I'm calling by phone.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. First of all, this is my first call with this in this town hall, and thanks to Alex. My name is Nami Kaur, and I just spoke with him a couple of days ago, and I just loved your talk, Tony. And it's very timely, and I know we are at the end of the call, so I'll keep it short. I didn't know how to unmute myself earlier. So my question is, or rather, I want to kind of piggyback or add to what you were saying about the IRA giving and through the wills. So I think a lot of people know about that. Of course, all of that, the process applies, how do we approach it, etc. But one of the things I found in my own little research was that a lot of people do not know that even while they're alive, while they're taking the RMDs, the required minimum distribution from their IRA accounts, they can have it sent directly to a nonprofit, and that is totally tax exempt. So when you give through the other charitable organizations or through your, it's tax deductible. So I just wanted to bring that little point because it's not well advertised or publicized. And I had to dig that for my own self. I don't know whatever the reason is, because maybe the IRS or the government wants your taxes, but just want to emphasize that little part that along this topic of planned giving through the wills and legacy planning, I think that's also another thing we should kind of talk about, whether it's in the.
Yes. Could you say your name again, please? No.
Sure.
Nami.
My name is Nami Kaur.
Nami, thank you. Yeah, what Nami is referring to is called a qualified charitable distribution. Qualified charitable distribution, or QCD. That's for donors who are 70 and a half and over. They have to be at least 70 and a half years old, and they can make a gift directly from their traditional IRA. Now, we do have to be concerned about the type of IRA. It only works with traditional, not Roth or SEP or Simple. Traditional IRA, they can make a gift of cash to you. They just contact their IRA administrator, the company that manages the IRA for them. And with those 3 bits of information, I hope, I'm not going to quiz anybody, but I hope you can name them: legal name, tax ID, office address. With those 3 bits of information, someone can make a gift of cash directly to your charity. And as Nami said, it counts toward it's called their required minimum distribution, and it's exempt from federal income tax, that the value of that gift.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Nami. And also, I think we're about to go, so I want to thank Lee and Satish also for your questions.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up here. We have each month of the rest of the year, and probably most of the months of the next year, we will have a town hall. We welcome suggestions from you all, what topics, but I'm always listening when I talk to you all, what things you seem to want to know about. And someone like Tony, who, he does consulting on these issues for organizations. And so it's, something that experts like him, they like to share it. And for those of you who want to go deeper, you can consider hiring him or some expert like him to take to take this to another level. There are lots of free resources online, but having an expert really helps. So, but this is where we're going to end. Thank you, Tony, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Not in the early days of COVID, but in a better time. And I look forward to being in touch with you.
Thank you all. Thanks very much for your time.
Tony.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
Tony.
Thank you,
And
Thank you for
Thank you.